You smell like fish and failure. Adaeze.
Those words were spoken in a room full of people. People who laughed, people who looked away, people who said nothing. She stood there, 19 years old, her second-hand dress still damp from the rain outside, her father's calloused hands the only inheritance she had ever known, and she did not cry. She smiled. Not the smile of someone who had given up, the smile of someone who had already decided. What she did next broke every single one of them. Please, sit back, relax, as we dive fully into this really remarkable story. Before the world knew her name, before the headlines, before the gasps in marble-floored boardrooms, there was a river. There was always a river. The Niger Delta at 5 in the morning is not a quiet place. It breathes. It groans. It smells of salt and diesel and something older than memory, the kind of ancient that settles into your bones and never quite leaves. The mangroves stretch their roots into the brown water like fingers reaching for something they lost long ago, and the fishing boats rock against each other with a sound like a slow, tired heartbeat. This was where Adaeze Okafor was born, not in a hospital, not with a doctor standing by, but on a narrow wooden boat, in the middle of that very river, because her mother had gone into labor 3 weeks early and her father, a broad-shouldered, quiet man named Adaeze Okafor, had rowed with everything he had, screaming her mother's name at the sky as if God himself needed to be reminded to pay attention. They did not make it to the shore in time. Adaeze came into the world surrounded by water, wrapped in her father's old fishing cloth, announced to the world by the cry of egrets lifting from the mangroves as if the river itself had startled at her arrival. Her father always said she was born fighting. Her mother always said she was born chosen. Growing up in Ikoro meant growing up with very little and learning to make that very little feel like everything. Their home was a modest structure of cement blocks and a corrugated iron roof that sang in the rain. 3 rooms, a kerosene lamp that flickered when the wind came through the gaps in the window frame, a small generator that her father ran only for 2 hours in the evening because fuel was expensive and dignity. He always said, costs more than fuel. Adaeze Okafor was not a man of many words. His hands told his story better than his mouth ever could, thick-knuckled, darkened by the sun, perpetually smelling of river water and engine grease, always moving, always working. He woke at 4 every morning, 7 days a week, and he did not complain about this. He was not the kind of man who complained. He was the kind of man who simply endured quietly with a steadiness that his daughter would one day carry like a second spine. Her mother, Chidinma, was different. She was all fire and color, a woman who hummed while she cooked, who laughed too loudly for the neighbors' comfort, who saved every naira she could from selling smoked fish at the market and spent it not on new wrappers or jewelry but on books. Dog-eared, second-hand, spine-cracked books that she stacked beside Adaeze, sleeping mat like a wall between her daughter and the smallness of their world. "They can take everything," Chidinma used to say, pressing a book into Adaeze's small hands. "But they cannot reach inside your head. What you put in there is yours, forever." Adaeze believed her. She read everything. Biology textbooks 3 years above her grade level, novels with pages missing, old newspapers, the backs of medicine bottles. She read under the kerosene lamp until her eyes ached and her mother told her to sleep, and then she read a little more after that. The market in Ikoro was the heartbeat of the town, loud, crowded, smelling of dried pepper and palm oil and human sweat, draped in color from morning to evening. Every Saturday, Adaeze helped her mother sell smoked fish from a wooden stall at the far end of the market, the stall they had inherited from her grandmother, the one with the broken leg that her father had fixed 17 times with different materials, and that still wobbled if you leaned on it wrong. Adaeze did not mind the work. She wrapped the fish in newspaper with efficient hands, calculated change in her head faster than the other women could reach for a calculator, and in between customers, she would prop a textbook against the stall leg and read. This was where she first noticed them, the Obi family. They were impossible not to notice. In a town where most people arrived at the market on foot or on Okada motorcycles, the Obis came in a black SUV with tinted windows and a driver who wore a white short-sleeve shirt and held the door open like they were entering a government house. Chief Donatus Obi had made his money in construction contracts, the murky, politically lubricated kind, and he wore his wealth the way some men wear armor, visibly, aggressively, daring anyone to question it. His wife, Ngozi Obi, did not shop at market stalls. She walked through the market and let the market come to her, vendors bringing their finest to her hands, best prices offered without haggling, because her patronage was something to be cultivated. She wore gold on both wrists. Her wrappers were always freshly pressed. She had the particular posture of a woman who had decided, at some point, that the world below her shoulders was not worth looking at, and their son. Chukwuemeka Obi. Emeka, though everyone called him M, was 17, tall in the loose-limbed way of young men who have not yet grown into their height, with sharp cheekbones and his mother's eyes. Dark, evaluating, slightly cold. He dressed in clothes that the other boys in Ikoro could not name the brands of. He carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never once been told no by anyone whose opinion he valued. That Saturday, he was waiting while his mother inspected some fabric 3 stalls down. He looked bored. He looked at Adaeze the way you look at furniture. She did not notice at first. She was reading, her finger moving along a line of biology text, her lips pressed together in concentration. It was only when she heard the laughter that she looked up. He was not alone. 2 of his friends stood with him, boys she recognized from the secondary school on the hill, the private one, the one with the painted fence and the generator that never went off. They were looking at her stall, at the smoked fish laid out in rows. "Sharp girl," one of them called out, grinning. "How much for the catfish, or is that your dinner?" More laughter. Adaeze looked at them steadily. She did not smile. She did not look down. 300 naira, she said, her voice even. "But you look like you can afford 500. Which one?" A beat of silence, and then unexpectedly, almost against his will, M laughed. Not the mocking kind, something more genuine. Startled out of him, he looked at her again, differently this time, the boredom replaced by something that might have been interest. His friend was not pleased. "You think say this fish girl get mouth," he muttered. But M had already looked away, following his mother back to the car. Adaeze watched them go. Then she looked down at her textbook and found her place again. She did not think about him after that. She was wrong to think it would be that simple. 2 years later, through the combination of a government scholarship, she had competed for against 400 other students, and won, her score the highest in the local government area. And her mother's careful, painful savings, Adaeze found herself sitting in a uniform at Ikoro Community Secondary School. Not the private school on the hill, but a real school. With a laboratory that worked on alternating Tuesdays and a library with 300 books, which was 300 more books than she had ever had access to at once. She was luminous there, not in the way that draws immediate attention, not loud, not showy, not the kind of luminous that announces itself. Hers was the quiet kind. The kind that teachers noticed first, then other students, then finally the ones who had not been paying attention realized they had been underestimating something for far too long. She topped her class in every subject. She joined the science club and rebuilt a broken Bunsen burner using parts from a kerosene stove. She tutored 3 classmates for free, not because she was asked to, but because she found that explaining things to others made her own understanding sharper, cleaner, more precise. But Ikoro was a small town, and the Obi family had fingers in everything, including the board of Ikoro Community Secondary School, which shared its annual science fair with the private school on the hill. Which meant that once a year, both schools occupied the same hall, which meant M. Obi. He had grown into his height. He moved now with full certainty, the loose-limbed boy replaced by a young man who understood, in the instinctive, uncomplicated way of someone who had never had to question it, that space existed for him to occupy. He was flanked always by people, laughing, agreeing, following. He noticed her at the science fair display. She had spent 3 weeks constructing a working model of a water filtration system built entirely from locally sourced materials. Sand, gravel, charcoal, a repurposed plastic bottle. Functional, elegant in its simplicity. 3 judges had stopped at her table already. He stopped too. "The market girl," he said. "The fish one." "I'm Adaeze Okafor," she said, "and you're blocking my display." He stepped aside, looked at her filtration system. Actually looked at it with those evaluating eyes of his, and she saw the moment he registered that it was impressive, and then she saw the moment he decided not to say so. "Bad," he said instead. "For a community school." She smiled at him then, not warmly, "Come back when you've built something," she said. He left. She watched him go with the same stillness she had given him at the market stall 2 years ago. That evening, her mother asked how the fair went. "Fine," Adaeze said. "I won first place." Put down her wooden spoon and turned around. "Place," she repeated, and her voice did the thing it always did when she was about to cry, went very quiet, very precise, like she was measuring each word so none of them spilled. "First place, Mama." Her mother crossed the room and held her daughter's face in both hands, those hands that smelled of smoked fish and palm oil and 1,000 early mornings, and she said nothing for a long moment. Then, "You carry the river with you, and WAM don't let anyone make you ashamed of it." Adaeze did not know then how much she would need those words. She did not know then how much worse it was going to get. The letter arrived on a Thursday. It came in an envelope so white and crisp it seemed almost wrong in her father's hands. Those weathered, river-darkened hands that turned it over carefully, slowly, like it might break. He could not read English well. He knew enough to know the letterhead was important. The logo in the corner, a torch and an open book, was the logo of the Federal Government Scholarship Board. He called her name once. She came, she read it again. Then she sat down very slowly on the wooden bench beside the door, and the sound she made was not quite crying and not quite laughing. It was something without a name, something that lives in the space between a prayer answered and the fear that you've misread it. Full scholarship. University of Lagos. Faculty of Medicine. The highest score in the state qualifying examination. Her mother, when she heard, did not make a sound at all. She went outside. She stood in front of their house in the early evening light, and she looked at the sky for a very long time, and then she came back inside with her face composed and her eyes red, and she began to cook. Because cooking was how Adaeze Okafor processed things that were too large for words. Her father sat beside her on the bench and put his hand over hers. "Grandfather used to say," he began in Igbo, slow and careful, "that the river does not ask permission from the rock. It just keeps moving." She rested her head on his shoulder. Outside, the river kept moving. What no one in their family knew, what Adaeze would only discover later, piecing it together from overheard conversations and a quiet admission from a classmate, was that she had not been the only one who applied for that scholarship. Obi had applied too. His father had made phone calls. Had done what men like Chief Donatus Obi do when they want things. He had leaned on the system, pressed his weight against the joints of it, tried to grease the mechanism in his son's favor. But the examination scores were public record, and Adeeze's score was not something you could argue with. She had beaten him by 41 points. She did not know this yet. She would not know it for years, but someone in the Obi household knew. And when Ngozi Obi, Chief's wife, saw Adaeze at the market the following Saturday, standing behind the wobbling stall with her mother, selling smoked fish one final time before she left for Lagos, she stopped. She looked at this girl in her second-hand dress with her calloused fisherman's father beside her, and she said, loud enough for the neighboring stalls to hear, "So the scholarship girl is you, the fish seller's child." She let her eyes travel from Adeeze's worn sandals to the top of her head. "Well, university is a big place. Let's see if a girl like you can survive it." It was not a wish for success. Everyone within earshot understood that. Adaeze looked at her. She held the woman's gaze, dark eyes meeting dark eyes, for 3 full seconds. "Thank you, Ma," she said. "I'll make sure to let you know how it goes." The silence that followed spoke louder than any confrontation could. Adaeze folded the newspaper around the last fish, handed it to the customer, looked at her mother. Chidinma was already smiling, the small, quiet, dangerous kind. "Pack your things," her mother said softly. "Lagos is waiting." She left Ikoro on a Saturday morning. Her father carried her bag to the bus depot. One bag, a second-hand suitcase held shut with a combination of its original latch and a length of rope her father had knotted himself, the way he knotted nets, and he did not say much on the walk there. He was not a man of many words. He had already said what needed to be said in the silence of that evening when the letter came, when he had placed his rough fisherman's hand over hers. At the depot, surrounded by the noise of engines and conductors calling routes and the smell of exhaust and morning food, he held both her hands. He looked at her, this daughter of his, born on a river, raised on kerosene light and her mother's books, and his jaw worked once, twice. "Be ashamed," he finally said. "Of any of it, not the fish, not the river, not this." He gestured at himself, at his worn shirt, his calloused hands, his whole humble, dignified life. "You come from clean hands, Adaeze. Remember that." She nodded. She would not cry until the bus had moved 3 streets away and she was certain he could no longer see her window. Then she cried for exactly 4 minutes. Then she opened her biology textbook. The storm had already begun, and it was silent. Lagos does not welcome you. It does not open its arms or soften its edges or make any accommodation for the fact that you are new, that you are young, that you arrived with 1 rope-knotted suitcase and a heart full of everything your mother pressed into you beside a kerosene lamp. Lagos simply exists, enormous, indifferent, loud in a way that is almost physical, like sound has weight here, and it presses against your chest when you step off the bus. Adaeze stood at the entrance of the University of Lagos campus on a Tuesday morning in September and felt, for the first time in her life, genuinely small. Not the smallness that others had tried to assign to her, the smallness of fish girl and market stall, and let's see if a girl like you can survive it. That smallness she had always known was a lie, a costume they tried to dress her in. This was different. This was the smallness of standing before something truly vast and understanding, with full clarity, that you are at the very beginning. She breathed it in. Then she picked up her suitcase and walked through the gate. Her dormitory room in Queen Amina Hall was shared with 3 other girls. Blessing Ez, from Abuja, her father a senator's aide, her luggage a matching set of burgundy hardshell cases that took up an entire corner of the room. She wore her hair in elaborate braids that cost more than Adaeze's monthly food budget, and she spoke with the particular confidence of someone who had never once stood in a market stall. Temi Ademi, from Lagos itself, Lekki, daughter of an architect and a pharmacist, who arrived on the first day with a laptop, a ring light, and the kind of easy social grace that suggested she had been performing her personality for an audience since childhood. She was not unkind. She simply occupied space in a way that left little room for others without noticing she was doing it. And Ngozi Ibe, no relation to the Ikoro Obis, a quiet, sharp-eyed girl from Enugu who studied with the intensity of someone who understood that the margin between her and failure was thin, and that she could not afford to let it close. She recognized something in Adaeze immediately. They became friends without ceremony, the way serious people sometimes do, simply by sitting near each other and not requiring anything performative. Blessing noticed Adaeze's suitcase on the first evening. She noticed the rope. She said nothing directly. She was too well-bred for that. But Adaeze saw her eyes move to it, saw the micro-expression that passed across her face like a cloud shadow, quick and unmistakable. "Where are you from?" Blessing asked, arranging her perfume bottles on the shelf above her bed. "Koro, Niger Delta." The sound was not quite dismissive and not quite interested. It was the sound of someone filing information into a category they had prepared in advance. "My father is a fisherman," Adaeze added. She said it the way her father had taught her, not as an apology. As a fact, clean and straight. Blessing's hands paused on a perfume bottle for just a moment, then continued. "That's lovely," she said. Temi, to her credit, looked up from her phone and said, "My uncle fishes." "Like recreationally, he says it's meditative." Adaeze looked at her. "My father fishes to feed us." A silence. Then Ngozi Ibe from her corner bed without looking up from her textbook. "Good, that means he's serious about it." And that quietly was the beginning of everything. Medical school at the University of Lagos is not built for the faint. It is a machine, efficient, merciless, designed to test not just your intelligence but your endurance, your willingness to stay when the reasonable thing would be to leave. The lecture halls seated 300 students. The professors did not take attendance, they took results. The library opened at 6 in the morning and closed at midnight, and even then there were students who stayed on the steps outside with their notes under their phone torches, squeezing more hours out of the dark. Adaeze was among them. She had no choice. She had no safety net, no father who could make a call, no family friend on the faculty, no buffer between her performance and her scholarship continuation. The scholarship required her to maintain a minimum grade point average. It was not a suggestion. It was the rope that connected her to everything she was building. She slept 5 hours a night. She ate once, sometimes twice. She walked everywhere because transport cost money she did not have. She wore the same 4 sets of clothes in rotation, washing them by hand in the dormitory bathroom on Sunday evenings, hanging them on the back of her chair to dry overnight. She did not complain about this, but others noticed. It was in the second semester that the cruelty began to organize itself. It was not dramatic at first. It rarely is. Cruelty in social spaces is almost always careful. It starts small, tests the boundaries of what the target will absorb, and grows in proportion to the silence it is met with. A comment about her shoes in the corridor, worn flat, repaired at the heel with a strip of rubber her father had glued before she left. "Adaeze, babe, those shoes have suffered more than us in anatomy practical." Laughter. Easy, careless, the kind that doesn't think of itself as cruelty. A wrinkled nose in the cafeteria when she brought out her packed lunch from home, leftover rice in a plastic container, because the cafeteria was 300 naira plate, and she could feed herself for a week on 300 naira if she was careful. What is that smell? Is that fish? Oh my God, someone is eating actual fish in here. The nickname came in the 3rd month. She did not know exactly who started it. By the time she overheard it, actually, in the corridor outside the biochemistry lab, it had already spread with the effortless speed of things that feel, to those saying them, harmlessly funny. "The fisherman's daughter," said with the weight her father gave to those words. Not the way her mother said you come from clean hands. Said the way you label something you have decided not to take seriously. Said with a small smile and a sideways look, and the particular casual confidence of people who have never once had to fight for a place at the table they were born sitting at. She heard it. She kept walking. She went into the biochemistry lab and she sat at her bench and she opened her notebook. She wrote the date at the top of the page. Then she wrote her notes. She did not allow herself to sit in it, the feeling. She had learned this, watching her father on the river. You do not fight the current by standing still and raging at it. You learn it. You use it. You find the line between what the water is doing and what you need to do, and you move. She moved. But even rivers have limits. The evening it broke through, the evening she allowed herself to feel it, was a Friday in March. She had just received her first semester results. First in her faculty. First. In a class of 300 students, many of them from the best secondary schools in Nigeria, many of them with tutors and laptops and parents who were doctors themselves. She had placed first. She called her father from the phone of the woman who ran the small shop outside the campus gate, because her cheap handset had stopped working 2 weeks before and she hadn't been able to replace it yet. He picked up on the 3rd ring. Adaeze. His voice, rough, cautious, the voice of a man who had learned that unexpected calls sometimes carry unexpected news. "Papa, I came first." Silence, she heard the river in the background, she heard him breathing. "First," he repeated, in the whole faculty. Another silence, longer, and then a sound she had heard only twice in her life from her father, not crying, something more interior than crying, a sound like something deep and tightly held finally exhaling. "Your mother," he said, his voice rough. "I need to tell your mother." "Tell her," I said. "She already knows," he said, and she could hear the smile now breaking through. "She has been praying since you left. She never stopped. She said you would." Adaeze leaned against the wall of the small shop. The Lagos evening moved around her, okadas and generators and the smell of suya from a nearby cart, and she held the phone against her ear and let herself, for exactly that moment, be a fisherman's daughter calling home. Then the call credit ran out. She handed the phone back to the shop woman and said, "Thank you," and she walked back to campus. She walked past a group of her classmates gathered on the steps of the faculty building, and she heard her name. The fisherman's daughter came first. Can you believe? And she kept walking with her spine straight and her face composed. The silence of her dignity spoke louder than any response she could have given. He appeared in her 3rd year. She had not thought of MOB often. Ikoro felt far from her now, not in distance but in dimension, like a place that existed in a different layer of reality, still real, still hers, but separated from Lagos by more than kilometers. She went home twice a year. She helped her mother at the stall. She sat with her father in the evenings and listened to the river. She brought textbooks and money she had saved from a small tutoring arrangement she had built with 2 struggling classmates who paid her in the only currency she'd asked for: consistency. She did not know MOB was at Lagos too. He was at Lagos Business School, a postgraduate program his father had enrolled him in after a business degree at a private university in Ibadan. She found this out not from him but from Blessing, who moved in the kind of social circles where such information traveled freely. "You know Chukwumeka Obi," Blessing said one evening, scrolling her phone. "His family is from your area, Niger Delta." "Ikoro," Adaeze said, without looking up from her anatomy textbook. "Yes, he's fine, Shaw." Blessing tilted her phone screen. A photo Lagos rooftop event, the kind photographed for lifestyle blogs. M in a white linen shirt, jaw sharper, eyes the same cool, evaluating dark. You know him personally. We've met. And Adaeze turned a page. And nothing. She ran into him 3 weeks later. University of Lagos has its own gravity, its intersections, its social orbits, the particular corridors and cafes and event spaces where paths cross regardless of intention. The encounter happened at a campus interfaculty mixer, an event she attended not for socializing, but because her scholarship body required a certain number of community engagement activities per semester, and it was either this or a Saturday morning cleanup exercise she could not afford to give up study time for. She was standing by the wall with a cup of juice she was not drinking, watching the room the way she always watched rooms, with her full attention, cataloging, evaluating, finding the information in the space. He saw her before she turned. Adaeze Okafor. She turned. He looked older, more settled in himself. The confidence had lost its youthful aggression. It was still there, but quieter now, more considered. He was dressed in a charcoal gray shirt, fitted, the kind that cost enough to look effortless. Held a drink loosely. He was looking at her with genuine recognition and something she couldn't immediately name. "M.O.B.," she said. "I heard you're first in your faculty." He said it without preamble. "Every semester." "That's impressive." The word landed differently from him than it would have from most people. She remembered the science fair, not bad for a community school. She remembered what he had not said about her filtration system. "At the business school," she said, "my father's plan." A ghost of something, self-awareness, maybe even frustration, moved across his face. "I'm making it work." She looked at him steadily. The old wariness was still there in her. This was a boy who had looked at her like furniture, whose mother had stood in the market and tried to make her small. But she was also a woman now who had learned to read people with the same precision she applied to her textbooks, and what she read in his face tonight was more complicated than she had expected. "Good," she said simply. "Make it work." He almost smiled. "You haven't changed." "Changed completely," she corrected, not unkindly. "You just don't have the reference points to see it." She finished her juice, set the cup down. "Good night, M," she said, and she walked back into the crowd. Behind her, she did not see his expression, the way it shifted slowly from mild amusement to something more careful and more serious, the way he watched her cross the room. A way he did not stop watching until she had gone. It happened in her final undergraduate year. Her mother got sick. Not suddenly. The body rarely betrays you suddenly. It had been building for months, the kind of quiet deterioration that a woman like Adaeze Okafor, who had spent her whole life prioritizing everything except her own body, would wave away with it as nothing. "I am fine. Don't worry about me." The cough that had started in the dry season. The weight she was losing without explanation. The fatigue that a woman who rose at 4 in the morning every day of her life was now admitting to, which meant it was real and serious because Adaeze Okafor did not admit to fatigue. The diagnosis came by phone, Adaeze standing in the corridor outside her biochemistry study session, her classmate's phone against her ear, her father's voice on the other end trying to hold itself steady and failing. Tuberculosis. Advanced. Treatable, the doctors said treatable, but the treatment cost money. Real money. More than her father could pull from river water and smoked fish, more than the household had ever held at once, more than the scholarship covered because the scholarship covered her fees. Not her mother's hospital bills. She went back into the study room. She sat down. She opened her book. She read the same paragraph 4 times without absorbing a word. Then she closed the book, put her head in her hands, and allowed herself, for exactly one moment, one precise and private moment, to feel the full weight of everything, the exhaustion. The years, the secondhand clothes and the packed lunches and the 5 hours of sleep and the nickname that followed her through corridors. The mother who had built her from books and smoked fish and prayers. The father who had knotted her suitcase shut with river rope and told her she came from clean hands, all of it, one moment. Then she lifted her head. She opened her notebook to a clean page, and she began to plan. She took on more tutoring clients. She applied for a supplemental academic grant she had found buried in the university's financial aid portal, a grant that almost no one applied for because it required a 12-page academic essay and 3 faculty recommendations. She wrote the essay in 2 nights. She got the recommendations from professors who had been watching her for 3 years with the quiet satisfaction of people who recognize something rare when they encounter it. She got the grant. She sent the money home. Her mother began treatment. And through all of it, through the fear and the sleeplessness and the particular loneliness of carrying a crisis in a place where no one around you knows you are carrying it, she did not drop a single grade. Not one. She graduated with a first-class degree, the highest GPA in the history of her faculty. When the results were posted, her professor, Dr. Afolabi, a compact man with wire-rimmed glasses who had said almost nothing personal to her in 4 years, stopped her in the corridor and said, quietly, "Whatever you are carrying, Miss Okafor, you carried it correctly. I have been teaching for 23 years. I want you to know that." She nodded. She thanked him. She walked outside and sat on the steps of the faculty building and called her father on a phone she now owned, a proper one, bought with tutoring money. He picked up on the first ring. She could hear the river. She could hear her mother in the background, weaker than before, but there. Present. Breathing. "Mama," she said. "First class, history of the faculty." A sound from the background, not words, just sound. The kind of sound that lives below language. Her father said nothing for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was steady in the way the river is steady, not still, not quiet, but constant. Moving, purposeful. "Come home," he said. "Before medical school starts, come home and let her see you." She went home. She sat beside her mother's bed in the cement block house with the corrugated roof that sang in the rain, and she held her mother's hand, thinner now, the fire of it banked but not extinguished, and Chidinma looked at her daughter for a long time. "They couldn't touch you," her mother said finally. Not a question. "No, Mama," Adaeze said. "They couldn't." Chidinma closed her eyes. "Good," she said, and she slept. Outside, the river kept moving. The storm that had been building quietly, patiently, invisibly for years across markets and dormitories and study halls and corridors had not yet arrived, but it was coming, and it was going to be magnificent. There is a particular kind of pressure that medical school applies to a person. It is not like the pressure of undergraduate study. That was weight, yes, but weight you could learn to distribute, to manage, to carry with a system and a schedule. Medical school is different. Medical school is the kind of pressure that does not care about your system. It finds the places where you have not yet been broken, and it presses there, specifically, with a patience that feels almost personal. Adaeze had expected this. She had read about it. She had spoken to doctors who came back to Ikoro on visits. There were not many, but there were some, and she had listened carefully when they described what the training does to you. She had prepared herself philosophically for the difficulty. What she had not prepared for was Dr. Emeka Eze. Not Obi, a different Emeka. This one was a consultant surgeon, mid-50s, barrel-chested, with a silver-streaked beard he kept immaculately, and the particular arrogance of a man who had been the most impressive person in every room he had ever entered, and had stopped being able to imagine a room where this might not be true. He was her supervising consultant in second-year clinical rotations. He was brilliant. She recognized this immediately and without resentment. She had learned early to separate a person's character from their competence, to take the competence seriously and make her own judgments about the character. Dr. Eze was a gifted diagnostician. His surgical instincts were the kind that other consultants came to observe. He was also a man who had decided, within the first week of her rotation, that Adaeze Okafor was not worth his serious attention. She was never sure exactly what produced this decision in him. Perhaps it was where she was from. Perhaps it was the quality of her clothes, still careful, still deliberate, still the wardrobe of a woman who managed money with precision because she had to. Perhaps it was something in the directness of her gaze, the way she asked questions without softening them with the performative deference that some of her colleagues used to smooth the social surface of the ward. Whatever the cause, the effect was consistent. He called on other students first. When she answered correctly, and she answered correctly almost always, he would receive the answer with a small nod and immediately redirect the discussion, as if her contribution was a formality to be processed rather than a thought to be engaged with. During surgical observations, he positioned her at the back. When she submitted her case study papers, his written feedback was brief to the point of meaninglessness. Adequate. Satisfactory. Meets minimum requirements. She watched this pattern establish itself over 6 weeks before she named it clearly, in her own mind, in the way she had learned to name things without drama. He does not see me. She did not rage against this. She documented it. Every rotation, every grade, every interaction. Precise, dated, factual. Not because she knew what she would do with it yet, but because her mother had taught her that what you write down cannot be taken from you, and her father had taught her that a fisherman who does not understand the current cannot navigate it. She understood the current. She navigated it. And in her end-of-year clinical assessments, evaluated by a panel of 3 consultants, not Dr. Adaeze alone, she scored in the 98th percentile. Dr. Adaeze looked at her scores on the printed assessment sheet during the results briefing, and his expression was a very specific kind of still. She did not smile at him. She simply moved on to her next rotation. He came back into her life the way weather comes, gradually, then all at once. It started with a message on her phone. She did not know how he had got her number, and she did not ask. She suspected Blessing, who had maintained a loose social connection with both of them through Lagos's overlapping elite circles without ever quite noticing that the 2 people were not actually in the same circle at all. I heard about your clinical results. Congratulations. She read it, set her phone down, picked it up. Thank you, she typed. That was all, but he was persistent in the way of someone who has decided that persistence is warranted, not aggressive, not entitled, but steady. A message every few weeks, an observation about something in the news, a question about medicine that she suspected he already knew the answer to but asked anyway as a reason to continue. He had a sharp mind when he chose to use it. She had always known this from the science fair, from that evening at the mixer. The intelligence was there. It had simply been for most of his life optional. Then one evening he called, not texted. Called, she almost did not pick up. She picked up. I want to take you to dinner, he said without preamble. A real dinner, not a campus event. Why? A pause. Because I've been thinking about what you said, at the mixer. That I don't have the reference points to see how you've changed. And I want the reference points. She was quiet for a moment. Outside her window, Lagos moved in its endless way, generators humming, traffic breathing, the city that never quite slept muttering to itself. One dinner, she said. One dinner, he agreed. The restaurant he chose was in Victoria Island, the kind of place with low lighting and white tablecloths, and a menu that did not include prices because the clientele it was designed for did not need to think about prices. She wore a dress she had bought secondhand from a boutique resale shop in Yaba, deep emerald green, simple cut, nothing that announced itself. Her only jewelry was a thin gold chain her mother had pressed into her hand before she left for Lagos the second time. Your grandmother's. Wear it when you need to remember you are not ordinary. She wore it now, not for him, for herself. He stood when she arrived. This surprised her, not the gesture itself, but the instinct behind it, the naturalness of it. He was in a fitted dark suit, no tie, the kind of assembled casualness that required real consideration. He looked at her across the restaurant with an expression she had not seen on his face before, something like wonder, small and controlled, but there. You look, he began. Hungry, she finished, sitting down. I have a 7 a.m. ward round tomorrow. He laughed, the real laugh, the one that had startled out of him at the market stall a decade ago when she had told him he was blocking her display. You are exactly the same, he said. I told you, I've changed completely. Things are true, he said, and the way he said it made her look at him more carefully. They talked for 3 hours. She had not expected that. She had prepared herself for the performance of it, the surface conversation, the social navigation, but what happened was different. He asked her real questions, about medicine, yes, but also about Ikoro, about her father, about what it had actually been like, the journey, the years, the carrying of it. He asked with genuine attention, the kind that does not look at its phone. And in return, cautiously, selectively, the way you open a door without fully stepping back from it, she told him. Not everything. She would never give anyone everything immediately, not as a matter of coldness, but as a matter of self-knowledge. She understood the value of what she carried, and she was not careless with it, but enough. Enough that when they left the restaurant and the Lagos night was warm around them and he asked if he could see her again, she said yes without the internal negotiation she had expected to need. Why? He asked, and the self-awareness of the question surprised her. I know what my family did, at the market with my mother, at the scholarship, I know. She looked at him on the pavement, this man she had first seen as a bored boy at a market stall who had looked at her like furniture. People are not only their families, she said. No, he agreed, but they are shaped by them. she said. So am I, a silence, the kind that holds something. That's what I want to understand, he said quietly. What you were shaped into. She studied his face for a long moment. The Lagos streetlights caught the angles of it, those sharp cheekbones, those evaluating eyes that were, right now, neither evaluating nor cold but something more exposed than that. Good night, Em, she said. She got into her taxi. She did not look back. But she was smiling. They fell into each other over 18 months, slowly at first, the way serious people fall, with deliberation and caution and the constant low awareness of what is at stake. He was attentive in ways she had not been prepared for, small and consistent, remembering the things she mentioned in passing, appearing with coffee outside the hospital gate on her night shifts, driving to Ikora with her once, sitting with her father on the riverbank in a way that cost him nothing socially and meant everything to the man beside him. Her father liked him. This was the thing that lowered her guard more than anything Em himself did. Her father, who said little and observed everything, who had the fisherman's instinct for reading what was beneath the surface. He liked Em Obi, not with enthusiasm, with the quiet steadiness of a man who has assessed something and found it acceptable. He looks at you properly, her father said once on the riverbank without preamble. Not at the surface. He looks for the underneath. You can tell that? She asked. A man who has only looked at surfaces his whole life, you can see when he starts trying to stop. It costs him something. Em pays the cost. She thought about this for a long time afterward. But the crack. There is always a crack. Not because love is weak, but because people are complicated, and complicated people carry their histories into every room they enter, and sometimes the room cannot hold both histories without the walls showing the strain. The crack appeared at a dinner party. Em's world, the Lagos elite, the money and connections world his family occupied, was not a world she moved through naturally, and both of them knew this. She was not intimidated by it. She had learned in medical school that every room is survivable if you are clear about why you are in it. But she was also not native to it, and the difference was occasionally visible to the people in it who were trained, by years of practice, to identify who belonged and who was a visitor. The dinner was at the home of a business associate of Em's, a man named Kelechi Okonkwo, real estate, the jaw-dropping house in Banana Island kind. 12 guests around a dining table that could have seated 20. Crystal glasses, 2 forks per place setting, the particular atmosphere of people who are performing for each other with the practiced ease of those who have been performing since childhood. She wore the emerald dress again. She sat beside Em. She was composed, articulate, present in the conversation when it intersected with things she knew, which was more often than the table expected, because she had spent years reading everything and could hold ground on politics, economics, literature, medicine, and the general texture of ideas in ways that surprised people who had filed her under a simpler category. She was not the problem. The problem was Em's response to her, not dramatic, not obvious. The kind of thing she might have missed if she had not spent years training herself to read the gap between what people say and what their body does while they are saying it. When she made a comment that landed well, that drew genuine laughter or interest from the table, she felt him stiffen, infinitesimally, beside her. A micro-tension. When Kelechi's wife leaned across the table and said, Em, where have you been hiding this one? She's extraordinary. She felt him smile, his social smile, the one that was slightly different from his real one, the one that did not reach his eyes. She's remarkable, he said, and the word was right. The intonation was right, but something in the pause before it, in the fraction of a second between the question and the answer, was wrong. She did not say anything that night. She sat with the observation the way her father sat with the river, watching, feeling the current, not yet ready to name the direction it was running. On the way home in the car, he was warm. He held her hand. He said the dinner had gone well. She agreed that it had. She looked out the window at the Lagos night blurring past. The storm had already begun, and it was silent. His mother arrived in Lagos on a Tuesday. Ngozi Obi, gold on both wrists, wrappers freshly pressed, the posture of a woman who had decided decades ago that the world below her shoulders was not worth looking at, arrived in Lagos for a family engagement and called her son to dinner at a hotel restaurant in Ikoyi. Em mentioned it the evening before. Casually, almost in passing. My mother wants to have dinner tomorrow, he said. Okay, Adaeze said. Pause. Just family, he added. She looked at him. He met her gaze for 1 second. then looked at his phone. She understood immediately. The understanding moved through her like cold water, fast, total, clarifying. "Of course," she said. Her voice was even. It was the same voice she used to deliver a difficult diagnosis to a patient's family, clear, controlled, carrying the full weight of what it was saying in its very steadiness. He heard it. She knew he heard it. He did not say anything else. She went to the hospital the next morning. She worked a 14-hour shift. She performed a complex procedure under supervision that her consultant described afterward as textbook, genuinely textbook, the kind of precision I want the residents to see. She accepted the compliment. She wrote her notes. She went home. She did not ask him how dinner went. He volunteered it too quickly, too much detail, the verbal texture of someone managing a story rather than telling one. His mother was well, the food was good, they discussed the family business, nothing significant. "Did you tell her about me?" Adaeze asked. A pause, 2 seconds, 3. "We touched on it," he said. "What did she say?" He was quiet. And in that quiet, in the exact shape and length of it, in the particular way his jaw tightened and his eyes moved slightly left, she found her answer. She nodded slowly. She said, quietly, not with anger. The anger, she understood, was there, deep and real and righteous, but it was banked, the way the fire in her mother's eyes was banked. Not extinguished, controlled. I need you to understand something." He looked at her. "I have been called the fish girl and the fisherman's daughter and the market stall girl. I have eaten packed lunches in front of people who wrinkled their noses. I have worn the same 4 sets of clothes for 3 years in a row. I have studied under a kerosene lamp and sent money home while sitting first in my faculty, and I have never, not once, been ashamed of where I come from." She stood. "But I will not be something a man hides." He reached for her hand. "Adaeze," she stepped back, not dramatically, just back, out of reach. "When you have decided what I am to you," she said, "you can tell me, but I won't wait long, I have too much to do." She picked up her bag, she left. He called 11 times that night. She did not pick up. She sat at her desk with her anatomy notes in front of her, and her mother's gold chain warm against her collarbone, and she thought about rivers. About the way the Niger Delta looked at 5 in the morning, breathing, groaning, smelling of salt, and something older than memory. About her father's hands on the oars. About the sound the egrets made lifting from the mangroves the morning she was born. She thought about what she was going to do next. And what she was going to do next was something that none of them, not not his mother, not the classmates with their nicknames, not Dr. Ez with his adequate and his satisfactory, none of them had seen coming. Because here is what they had all made the same mistake about. They had looked at her circumstances and assumed they were her ceiling. They had seen the secondhand clothes and the smoked fish and the rope-knotted suitcase and the village riverbank, and they had calculated, in that instant and instinctive way that people calculate such things, what she was capable of. They had calculated wrong. She had applied 6 months earlier for a fellowship. Not any fellowship. The Wellcome Trust International Clinical Research Fellowship, one of the most competitive medical research programs in the world, offering 2 years of fully funded specialist training split between Lagos and Imperial College London, with a research grant and a formal pathway into consultant-level practice. 12 positions. Awarded globally. She had told no one, not her roommates, not her professors, not not even her parents, because she had learned, by now, the precise cost of hope invested in an outcome before the outcome was confirmed, and she would not put that weight on her father's shoulders until she had something solid to hand him. She had written the application over 4 months. She had requested references from 3 faculty members who had watched her perform for 5 years with the quiet satisfaction of people who recognize something rare. She had submitted her research proposal, a study on tuberculosis treatment accessibility in rural Niger Delta communities, drawn directly from her mother's illness, from the gap she had felt with her own hands between what the medical system offered and what families like hers could actually access. It was not an abstract academic exercise. It was her mother's cough in the dry season. It was her father's voice on the phone trying to hold itself steady. It was the 14 days she had spent calculating, in the margins of her study notes, how to find money that did not exist for treatment that could not wait. She had turned personal devastation into research precision. And 6 months after submission, 3 days after she walked out of M's apartment with her bag over her shoulder, and his 11 missed calls accumulating on her phone, the email arrived. "Dear Dr. Okafor, we are delighted to inform you." She read it twice. She set her phone face down on the desk. She sat very still for a moment. The way the river is still before a current shifts, the stillness that is not absence of movement but the gathering of it. Then she picked up the phone. She called her father. He picked up on the first ring. "Adaeze." "Papa," she said. "Something has happened." She heard the river. She heard the boat knock against the dock. She heard her father breathe. "Good or bad?" "The best thing," she said. "The very best thing." And then she heard her mother's voice in the background, weaker than it used to be, but present, always present, saying, "Emeka, what did she say? What did she say?" And her father, away from the phone, his voice warm with something that had no name. "She says the best thing. She says the very best thing happened." Adaeze pressed her hand flat against her desk. The fellowship. London, Imperial College. 2 years, a research grant, a pathway, everything. And in 3 weeks' time there was going to be an event, a gala. The Lagos Medical and Business Excellence Awards, an annual evening in the grand ballroom of the Eco Hotel, attended by the finest names in Lagos medicine, business, and society. The kind of event that made the lifestyle pages of every major Nigerian publication. The kind of event the Obi family attended every year in their best clothes, among the city's most powerful people. She had been nominated, Rising Star in Medicine, for her research proposal, already cited by 2 faculty members in their own published work, for her clinical performance. For 5 years of being first in rooms where no one expected her, she had been going to decline the nomination quietly. She had enough to do. She did not need the ceremony. She changed her mind. Because if there was going to be a room full of Lagos's most powerful people, a room the Obi family would be sitting in, a room where a fisherman's daughter from the Niger Delta was going to stand at a podium, she was going to be standing correctly. She was going to be standing completely. She called her mother back. "Mama, I need you to tell me what Grandma's gold earrings look like. The ones you kept." A pause. "Why?" Her mother's voice banked fire but brightening. "Because I need to borrow them," Adaeze said. "I have somewhere to be." She did not tell him about the fellowship. Not immediately. Not out of cruelty. Cruelty had never been her instrument. But because she had learned, through years of carrying important things in quiet, that some truths need to arrive in their own time, in their own space, with witnesses who can confirm what they saw. She had also learned this. The most powerful thing a woman who has been underestimated can do is not to announce her arrival. She simply arrives. The 3 weeks between the fellowship letter and the gala were the most clarifying of her life. She called the fellowship board and confirmed her acceptance. She spoke with the program coordinator at Imperial College London, a warm, precise Scottish woman named Dr. Margaret Firth, who had reviewed every application personally, and told Adaeze, without ceremony, that her research proposal was the most grounded and ethically urgent piece of work in this year's cohort. She arranged a meeting with her faculty dean, who wept quietly, professionally, turning slightly away from her desk to compose himself before turning back. He had known, he said. He had always known it was a matter of time. She called Ngozi Ibe, her dormitory friend, now a resident in pediatrics, and told her over jollof rice at their usual restaurant. Ngozi set down her fork, picked it up, set it down again. "Imperial," she said. "Imperial," Adaeze confirmed. "London. London." Ngozi Ibe, who had not cried since her father's funeral 4 years ago, pressed her lips together very hard for a very long time. "Your mother," she finally said. "Does she know?" "She knows something happened. She doesn't know the full shape of it yet." "Tell her," Ngozi said. "Tell her everything. She needs to hear every word of it." She went home to Ikoro the weekend before the gala, 1 weekend, 48 hours. The house was the same cement blocks, corrugated roof, the window gap where the wind still came through. Her father had repainted the front recently. She could see the brush strokes, careful and unhurried, the way he did everything. The generator ran for 3 hours in the evening. The kerosene lamp was still there on the shelf, though they used it less now. Her mother was thinner. The treatment was working, the doctors confirmed this, the tests confirmed this. But the illness had taken something physical that had not fully returned yet. She moved more slowly. She tired more easily. The fire was still there, entirely there, banked but present, the same flame, but the body that carried it was quieter now. Adaeze sat beside her on the bed that evening, the Lagos city sounds replaced by the river sounds she had grown up inside of, and she told her everything. The fellowship. The application she had written alone in secret over 4 months. The research proposal built from her mother's own illness. Imperial College London. Dr. Margaret Firth. 12 positions worldwide. Adaeze Okafor listened without interrupting. When Adaeze finished, her mother was quiet for a long time. The river breathed outside. The corrugated roof clicked in the evening temperature change. Then her mother reached out and placed her palm, thinner now, lighter, but still warm with the particular warmth that had pressed books into small hands for years beside a kerosene lamp, against her daughter's face. "Want you to understand something," Adaeze said. Her voice was low, precise, every word measured. "When I was in labor on that boat, when I knew you were coming and there was nothing to catch you but water and your father's hands and the cloth from his back, I was not afraid." Adaeze was very still. "I was not afraid," her mother repeated, "because I knew what you were. Before you had drawn a single breath, I knew what you were going to be." Her thumb moved slowly across Adaeze's cheekbone. "I have watched you carry things that would have stopped other people. I have watched this world try to name you as less than you are, and I have watched you refuse the name every single time without anger, without bitterness, just refusal. Clean refusal." Her eyes were bright, not spilling. Bright. "London," she said. "Imperial College London." She let the words sit in the room, fill it, take up the space they deserved. "My daughter." Her father appeared in the doorway. He had heard. She could see on his face, that broad, weathered, river-darkened face, the full weight of it moving through him. He did not try to speak. He came to the bed. He sat on the other side of his daughter. He put his arm around her. The three of them sat in the cement block house with the corrugated roof and the sound of the river. No one said anything else. No one needed to. The Lagos Medical and Business Excellence Awards occupied the grand ballroom of the Eco Hotel with the particular grandeur of an event that understood its own significance and had dressed accordingly. Crystal chandeliers suspended above circular tables draped in ivory linen. Centerpieces of white orchids and gold accents. The soft, deliberate ambience of professional lighting designed to make everyone in the room look their most polished version of themselves. 300 guests, doctors, surgeons, hospital directors, business leaders, the interlocking Lagos world of medicine and money and social standing, all dressed in the language of their success. Adaeze arrived at 7:45. She wore a gown the color of midnight, deep navy, floor-length, structured at the shoulders and fluid below, the kind of garment that does not perform but simply exists with complete confidence in its own rightness. Her grandmother's gold earrings, large, circular, the beaten gold of something old and deliberate, and kept carefully across decades, at her ears. The thin gold chain at her throat. Her hair pinned up with the precise simplicity of a woman who does not need ornamentation to be seen. She walked into the ballroom alone. She had a seat at the nominees' table. She found it. She sat. She accepted the glass of water a server offered, smiled at the colleague seated beside her, a cardiologist from LUTH who recognized her from a conference paper she had presented, and settled into the room the way she settled into every room now, with full attention, full composure, full presence. She did not look around for the OBs. She did not need to. They were there. Table 6. She clocked it peripherally, without turning her head. Chief Donatus Obi, larger than she remembered, in an agbada of deep burgundy with gold thread, the fabric of a man who wants to be read as important from across a room. Ngozi Obi beside him, gold at both wrists, wrapper immaculate, the posture unchanged in all the years since a market stall in Ikoro, and charcoal suit, white shirt. The sharpest she had ever seen him dressed, which meant his mother had either chosen the suit or issued firm opinions about it. He was seated between a family friend and a cousin, his phone face down on the table. His attention moving around the room in the way of someone who has not yet found what they are looking for. He found it when she walked in. She felt his gaze, that particular quality of being seen by someone who has been looking, and she did not turn toward it. She walked to her table. She sat. She accepted her water. She spoke to the cardiologist beside her. She let him look. The program began at 8. Welcome address. Opening remarks from the Medical and Dental Council of Nigeria representative. A short film celebrating Nigerian medical achievement over the previous decade, during which the room went respectfully quiet and the light from the screen moved softly over 300 attentive faces. Then the awards: excellence in research, excellence in clinical practice, healthcare leadership, service to underserved communities. And then, fourth on the program, announced by the MC with the particular energy of someone who has been told this category carries significance this year, the Rising Star in Medicine Award. For exceptional early career achievement in clinical performance, academic contribution, and research impact, ladies and gentlemen are nominees. 3 names, hers was last. When they read it, Dr. Adaeze Okafor, University of Lagos College of Medicine, and newly appointed Wellcome Trust International Clinical Research Fellow, Imperial College London. The MC paused, because even he understood that the second half of that sentence deserved a pause. The room responded. Not just polite applause, a different quality of response, the kind that moves through a space when people are registering something real. 300 people processing simultaneously, Imperial College London, Wellcome Trust, International Fellowship. At table 6, she did not need to look to know what was happening, she could feel it. They announced the winner at 9:15, the envelope. The pause the MC allowed himself trained showmanship, the unfolding of the card. Rising star in medicine, Dr. Adaeze Okafor. She stood. The room rose with her. Not all of it, but enough. A wave of standing that moved from the nominee's table outward, spontaneous and genuine. The kind of response you cannot manufacture for a room of professionals who know what an Imperial College Fellowship means, who understand the weight of the research she had submitted, who are sophisticated enough to recognize the difference between achievement and extraordinary achievement. She walked to the stage. The walk was 20 steps. She counted them without meaning to. It was the precision habit, the measuring reflex she had built over years of needing to know exactly where she was at any given moment. 20 steps. Straight back. Grandmother's gold at her ears catching the chandelier light. Her father's river in her blood. She reached the podium. She took the award, a crystal column, heavy and cold and solid in her hands, and she looked out at the room, 300 faces. And among them, at table 6, 3 faces she knew. Chief Donatus Obi, registering the information, recalibrating the particular expression of a man who has been wrong about something significant and is working out how wrong. Ngozi Obi still. Very still. The gold at both wrists not moving. Her eyes on the stage. Her posture, for the first time Adaeze had ever observed it, not the posture of a woman looking down. And M was not recalibrating. M was not still. M was looking at her with the expression of a man who has understood something that should have been obvious much earlier. The particular quality of recognition that arrives too late, that finds you in a public room with no privacy to absorb it. He looked like someone watching the river after the boat has already gone. She had prepared remarks. Brief, professional, the appropriate length for an award acceptance at a formal gala. She looked down at them for one moment. Then she set them on the podium and did not look at them again. I grew up on the Niger Delta, she began. Her voice was steady. Not performed steadiness, the real kind, the kind built over years of choosing it. My father is a fisherman. My mother sold smoked fish at a market stall in Ikoro. We lived in a 3-room house with a corrugated iron roof, and I did my homework under a kerosene lamp. And when I won the federal government scholarship to study medicine, I packed everything I owned into one bag that my father tied shut with a piece of rope from his fishing nets. The room was absolutely quiet. I am telling you this not for sympathy. I don't need sympathy, and I never have. I am telling you this because there are people in this room, there are people in this country, who looked at a girl from a fishing village with one rope-knotted bag and decided, before she had spoken a word, what she was capable of. A pause. They were wrong. Simple, clean, without triumph, the way her father stated facts. I want to dedicate this award to my father, Emeka Okafor, who taught me that the river does not ask permission from the rock. It just keeps moving. Her voice did the thing her mother's voice did, went very quiet, very precise, each word measured. And to my mother, Chidinma Okafor, who built me from books and early mornings, and the particular kind of love that does not soften the world for you but teaches you that you are strong enough to take it as it is. She lifted the crystal column slightly. I am going to London, she said, to Imperial College. To do research that I hope will change how we treat tuberculosis in rural communities across the Niger Delta, so that the next time a fisherman's wife gets sick, her family does not have to calculate which wall to take the brick from. Silence held for one more breath. Then the room responded, fully, completely, on its feet. The kind of applause that does not begin at the edges and build but arrives all at once, like weather. She stood at the podium and received it with her spine straight and her grandmother's gold at her ears and the river in her blood. She did not look at table 6. She didn't need to. It was Em who found her. Of course it was. She was standing in the corridor outside the ballroom, the marble-floored, high-ceilinged corridor where the sound of the event inside arrived as a softened murmur, holding the crystal award and breathing the cooler air, allowing herself a moment of stillness before she went back in. She heard his footsteps. She recognized them. She did not turn around immediately. Adaeze. She turned. He looked undone, not dramatically. The suit was still perfect, the jaw still sharp, but something behind his eyes had come loose from its moorings and had not yet found anywhere to rest. He looked like a man who had been certain about something for a long time and had just watched that certainty dissolve in real time, in public, in front of people whose opinions had structured his entire life. "You knew," he said, "before you left my apartment. You already knew about the fellowship." "I knew 3 days before," she said. "You didn't tell me." He looked at the crystal in her hands, at her face, at the gold at her ears. "Why?" His voice was not angry. It was something more vulnerable than anger, the voice of someone genuinely asking, genuinely trying to understand. She considered her answer for a moment. "Because I needed to know," she said slowly, "whether you were going to choose me before you knew, not after. Not because I became something that made the choice easier for your family to accept, but because of what I already was." A silence. "And I needed to know that for myself," she continued. "Before I went to London, before I started the next part, I needed to know what I was walking away from clearly so that I could walk forward clearly." He was quiet for a long time. "I made a mistake," he said. "The dinner, my mother, I am," she said it quietly, not harshly. "I know. I want to fix it." She looked at him. This man she had watched grow from a bored boy at a market stall to something more honest, more real, more worth knowing than his family's money had ever required him to be. She felt the complexity of him, the genuine growth and the genuine failure, the care that was real and the cowardice that was also real, the man who had sat with her father on the riverbank and paid the cost, and the man who had excluded her from his mother's dinner table. People are not simple. She had always known this. "I'm going to London in 8 weeks," she said. "I know. I'm going to do the work I came here to do, the work that was always the point." "I know," he said again, and then quieter, "I'm proud of you. I know I don't have the right to say that, but I am. I have been for years, long before tonight." She heard it. She believed it, which was the complicated part. She believed it was true, and she also understood that believing something true about a person does not resolve everything that person has done. "What your mother said in that market," Adaeze said. "Years ago, she said, let's see if a girl like you can survive it." He closed his eyes briefly. "I survived it," she said. "I did more than survive it." He said, "You did." "Don't need an apology from her," Adaeze said. "I don't need anything from her. I want you to understand that. I am not standing here tonight waiting for anyone's acknowledgement. I am not built from other people's recognition of me." She held the crystal columns, solid, cold, hers. "I am built from a river," she said, "and a kerosene lamp and my mother's hands." He looked at her for a long moment. "I know," he said. "That's what I should have told them." She nodded slowly. "Yes," she said, "it is." She looked at him one more time, clear-eyed, without anger, without longing, with the full and settled peace of a woman who has chosen herself so completely that there is no room left for resentment. Then she picked up her award. "Take care of yourself, Em," she said, and she walked back toward the ballroom. She had not planned this. She had not planned to pass table 6 on her way back to her seat. She had not rehearsed anything, had not prepared words, had not decided in advance what she would do if their paths crossed in the room. But the ballroom is one room, and paths cross. Ngozi Obi saw her coming. And something happened on the older woman's face that Adaeze had never seen there before. Not in the market, not in the corridor outside the exam hall, not in any of the memories she carried of this woman who had looked at her daughter's suitcase and her second-hand clothes and her smoked fish and calculated, instantly and completely, that she was not worth serious consideration. The gold at both wrists was still. The wrapper still immaculate. The posture still correct, but the eyes were different. Adaeze stopped at the edge of the table. She did not smile. She did not perform warmth she did not feel. But she also did not deliver the words she might once, in the raw years, in the dormitory with the 4 sets of clothes and the packed lunch, have imagined delivering. The triumphant speech. The reversal. The "you said I would not survive, and here I am." She was past that. That was the thing they had never understood about her. Any of them. From the classmates with the nickname to Dr. Ez, with his adequate to the woman sitting in front of her now. They had imagined that someone fighting their way up from the bottom was fighting toward something she could use against the people at the top. They had been wrong. She had been fighting toward herself. She looked at Ngozi Obi and she said, simply, the thing she had said years ago at a market stall in Ikoro, the same words, in a different room, carrying an entirely different weight. I told you I would let you know how it went. Then she walked to her seat. Behind her, the silence at table 6 was the loudest thing in the room. She called her parents from the car on the way home. Her mother picked up late, but Adaeze Okafor had never been a woman who slept soundly when her daughter was somewhere important. How did it go? Her mother's voice banked fire, bright in the dark. I won, Mama. A sound. The nameless sound, not crying, not laughing, the one that lives below language. Tell me, her mother said. Tell me everything. So she did. She told her about the ballroom and the chandeliers, and the 300 people and the crystal award that was sitting on the seat beside her now, cold and solid and real. She told her about the speech, and heard her mother make a soft, sharp sound when she described the part about the kerosene lamp. She told her about the corridor and M, honestly and completely, without drama and without minimizing, the way she told her mother most things. And she told her about the table, about Ngozi Obi's face, about the 7 words she had said. Her mother was quiet for a long time after that. Then she laughed, not the polished laugh, not the social one, the real one, the one Adaeze had grown up inside of, too loud for the neighbors' comfort, full-bodied and unashamed and blazing with everything that had ever made Adaeze Okafor impossible to diminish. 7 words, her mother said when she could speak again. 7 words after all these years. It was enough, Adaeze said. It was exactly enough, her mother agreed. Her father's voice in the background, what did she say? And her mother pulling slightly away from the phone, telling him, and then silence, and then his voice, low and private and not meant for her to hear clearly, but she heard it anyway. That's my daughter. That is my daughter. She pressed her hand flat against the seat beside her, against the cool base of the crystal column. Outside the car window, Lagos moved in its endless, indifferent, magnificent way, generators and traffic, and the smell of the night and the city that never quite sleeps. In 8 weeks she would leave it for London. For Imperial, for the research that would carry her mother's illness into policy, into practice, into change. She was not at the end of anything. She was at the very beginning. But it was a beginning she had earned in a way that no one could recalculate, reframe, or take from her. It was hers the way the river was hers, bone-deep, ancient, flowing. Mama, she said, and WAM, to sleep. Her mother laughed again. When you get home, she said. Call me when you get home. Yes, Mama, she ended the call. She looked out the window. Somewhere behind her, in a grand ballroom of the Eco Hotel, the Lagos Medical and Business Excellence Awards were winding down, the tables emptying, the orchid centerpieces being cleared, the chandelier light dimming over ivory linen. Somewhere at table 6, a woman in a freshly pressed wrapper was sitting with gold at both wrists, and a silence she would carry home with her. Somewhere in a marble corridor, a man in a charcoal suit was working out what he was going to do with what he now understood about himself. And somewhere on the Niger Delta, on a narrow wooden boat on a brown river at this very moment, because her father kept strange hours, always had, the river did not observe schedules. A fisherman with broad shoulders and weathered hands was moving through the dark water, and perhaps he was thinking of his daughter, and perhaps the egrets were lifting from the mangroves in the dark, and perhaps the river looked the way it always looked at the edge of everything breathing. Ancient, moving, unstoppable. She arrived home at midnight. She set the crystal award on her desk, beside her anatomy notes and her fellowship acceptance letter and a photograph she kept there. Her parents on the riverbank, her father's arm around her mother, the water behind them catching afternoon light. She looked at the photograph for a long time. Then she sat down, she opened her laptop. She began to write, not the fellowship research that would come, not correspondence, not notes, something else. The first lines of something she had been carrying for a long time without knowing it was a story yet, without knowing she was ready to put it down. My father is a fisherman. My mother sold smoked fish at a market stall in Ikoro. I was born on the river in the early morning, and the egrets lifted from the mangroves when I arrived, as if the river itself had startled at something it recognized. I did not know then what I would become. I only knew the water. I only knew the light. It was enough. It was always enough. And that right there is where her story finds its peace, not in revenge, not in the hollow satisfaction of watching others fall. but in the quiet, complete, unshakable knowledge of who she is and where she comes from and what she has built from the most honest materials a life can offer: hard work, a mother's love, a father's hands, and a river that taught her before she could speak that moving forward is not a choice. It is a nature. Adaeze Okafor was never the fisherman's daughter in the way they meant it, as a limitation, as a ceiling, as a reason to be overlooked. She was the fisherman's daughter the way the river is the river, deep, purposeful, impossible to stop. And the people who mocked her, they are holding a hollow victory in an empty room, the victory of having once made someone feel small, in a world that has long since moved past them to watch what she became. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone you know, or someone you are still becoming, give it a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Because somewhere right now, there is a fisherman's daughter under a kerosene lamp, reading past the hour she was told to sleep. She needs to know how this story ends. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories. See you in the next one.